Hi, my name is Will Stewart. I'm a fifth grade teacher and a co-founder of Edgy. And today I'm going to talk about Fisher and Frey's gradual release of responsibility. Some of you may also know this as I do, we do, you do. And I'm going to talk about how Edgy can help teachers and students succeed with this important model. Fisher and Frey write, cognitive work should shift slowly and intentionally from teacher modeling to joint responsibility between teachers and student to independent practice and application by the learner. In other words, teachers should start out by demonstrating a skill, then teachers and students should work through it together, and finally the students should work on the skill on their own. So why should you use Edgy to implement this? Using the I, we, you model in Edgy makes it easier and ensures success for teachers and students. We do this by providing you with tools, insights, and opportunities for feedback that support both the teacher and the student. In this presentation, I'm going to go over how to choose a text, how to use the Edgy tools, and then some of the frequent questions that come up around using this model. Finally, I'll walk you through the I, we, and you, and the data that comes from using Edgy with students in this model. It's easy to create an Edgy reading, and if you don't know how, there are lots of videos available to show you. In this video, I'm going to talk about a more complicated topic, which is choosing a text. Honestly, we could talk about this for a very long time, and there's a lot of additional resources and information out there on the web that I would encourage you to look at. But a few questions that you'll want to ask yourself before you choose a text are, is there a particular skill you're teaching? For example, if you're trying to teach your students how to identify main idea, you're going to want to choose a text accordingly. How many times have students tried this strategy? Is it something that they're completely unfamiliar with or something that they have done many times before? What grade level are you teaching, and at what grade level do your students read? These are two questions that you'll need to consider side by side. Are you looking for a text that meets the needs of a specific group of students or the abilities of the lowest readers in your class? Once you've chosen a text, put it into Edgy and share the code with your students. This will allow them to join the reading. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how you shape this I do, we do, you do experience inside of Edgy. It's important to understand that Edgy is a flexible tool and that it has many different parts that you can experiment with to perfect this model. You'll need two of these parts to ensure the best possible gradual release of responsibility. The first part or tool is heat vision, and the heat vision button controls what students see. When heat vision is on, students can see and respond to each other's comments. When heat vision is off, and this is the default, students can only see their own comments and the comments of the teachers, or multiple teachers if you're using the co-teaching feature. The second part or tool you'll need is the group code. This code allows students to join the reading, and it's very simple. They don't need to have a membership or even an email to use Edgy, just this code. You'll want to start your reading with the code hidden. This will allow you to demonstrate the skill without your students starting without you. Something to think about before we get into the specific I do, we do, you do is a quote from Professor Timothy Shanahan. He writes, I do it, we do it, I do it again. We try to do it again, but this time a little differently. We do it, we do it, oops, I have to do some of it with more explanation. You do it, no, not quite like that. You do it, we do it again. Okay, now you can do it. I know it isn't catchy, but it is more descriptive of how the process really tends to work. And what Professor Shanahan is trying to say here is that it's totally normal to jump around between these three different areas, I, we, and you. And if you actually look at Fisher and Frey's model, you'll see that there are actually more than three parts to it. But thinking about it as I, we, and you is a much simpler way of framing this instructional model. Let's take a look Should I teach one skill or multiple skills? This is another question that also comes up. Frey and Fisher explain that ultimately readers must learn to do and think many different ways all at once. In other words, a good reader looks at a text and applies many skills all at once. But having said that, they also go on to explain that it can often be more effective to teach one or two skills at a time than trying to have them implement multiple skills or all the skills all at once. Okay, let's do an I do, we do, you do in edgy. Here we go. First, the I do. As a teacher, everything you highlight and comment on in edgy will be accessible to your students. They'll always be able to see it, every single one of them, the whole time they're in the reading. To model a strategy, you'll click on images and words to leave a comment. You can use audio, text, and emoji comments to show your thinking. One suggestion is if you have readers in your class who struggle with reading, you may want to use your audio comments. The value of the audio comments is they can be played repeatedly and they don't require any reading to understand them. As you're going through the text, you read and write and think out loud with phrases like, as I read, I am wondering why this image is at the top and how it might connect to the text or what I already know. Or you might say things like, great readers are looking for text features and trying to connect them to their understanding of the text. As you go through this I do part of the model, your goal is to demonstrate to students what they should be doing when they are in the text. And again, you may need to jump back into the I do model from time to time to really fine-tune and hone their understanding of what it is they are being asked to do. When you move into the we do part of the model, this is where you're going to be shifting some of the responsibility over to the students, hence the gradual release of responsibility. I do to we do. It's a shift. In this, students will be doing guided instruction and constructive group work. So when you feel that students have a grasp of what they are being asked to do, you can click the little key icon to reveal the reading code. This will allow students to join the reading. You may want to use the student button, which is shown here on the screen. You may want to use that button to see who is and isn't interacting with the text, or to take a look at individual students' progress. The feed button will show you every comment that is being made and can give you another insight into what your students have learned and are demonstrating. You may find that the heat vision button changes. And what I mean by that is you may find that you want to leave it on. Sometimes you might find other times that it's best to leave it off. Whether you start with it on or off is something you'll have to decide for yourself. But it's a very powerful tool for shifting the weight of responsibility between the individual student and between the group as a whole. And so when you're thinking about the gradual release of responsibility, think of that heat vision button as being a way of shifting the responsibility. When it's on, it's collaborative, and when the heat vision is off, the student is working individually. When I do this in my class with the We Do, the two things that I'm looking at the most are the student button to see who is and isn't making comments. If a student isn't leaving comments, that's a pretty good indication to me that they are not understanding the skill that I demonstrated to them, so I might need to do some individual coaching for them. And if I see that most of the class is not responding to the text, that's another clue to me that I might need to shift back to the I do and demonstrate to them again the skill that I'm asking for. The other tool, as I mentioned, is the fire feed or the feed button. This shows me every comment that is being made in chronological order in real time. If I look up on the board and I see a lot of, on topic, well-placed comments, that tells me that those students understand what they're being asked to do. If I see students who are, if I see either students or comments that are not quite accurate, that tells me that either that individual student or the class as a whole needs me to remodel this skill. Once I feel that my students are showing an understanding of the skill as a group, that's when we shift over to the you do. This is when the individual students are being asked to work on their own to master and demonstrate a skill. As I mentioned earlier, I may need to jump back and forth between I do, we do, and you do. If there are just a couple students who are struggling, I might go over to them and individually, so one-on-one, demonstrate what it is I'm asking them to do. So it is a form of I do, but it's tailored to that individual student. As I'm doing the you do, the recap button really becomes a crucial part of my insight as a teacher. And I'm going to go over the insights and the data that come out of Edgy, but just remember that you've got that recap button that will show you individual students and everything that they are doing inside of a reading. Another thing to consider is that fire feed again. Sometimes I like to display that up on the projector in my room. That way the entire class can see it. So even though they can't see their classmates' comments in their text because vision is off, they can still see what other comments are being made by looking up at the board. This is also an opportunity for me to look up at the board, see who is saying the quote right things and who is saying quote the things that, let's just call them the wrong things, but the things that they're going to need a little bit of feedback and a little bit of support in order to start making the quote right kinds of comments. So eventually class is going to end, and eventually I'm going to have a chance to look at the data more in depth. So what should I do with the data? Well, some things that I like to ask myself when I'm looking at their comments, when I'm looking at the amount of time they spent, what did the students highlight? And also, what didn't they highlight? You're going to see that readings have different colors of the highlights. Yellow demonstrates or shows that just a few students have highlighted it. Red and really dark, kind of almost maroon, show that many, many students highlighted it. So the parts that are and are not highlighted, that's a key insight. Second, who highlighted? Who didn't? And then by accessing the reading recap, I can see how long they spent reading as individuals and also as a class. All of this information can help me make better decisions about what they might need to be taught tomorrow or who I might need to work with one-on-one when I have an opportunity to. Okay, well, thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you on the Discover feed.